In the middle of a busy city park, a man named Tom sat quietly on an old wooden bench. Every day, people walked past him without giving a second glance. To them, he was just another homeless man who had nowhere else to go. His clothes were old and faded, his beard rough, and his shoes had holes. But behind that tired look, Tom's eyes were sharp and alert. They held the calm focus of someone who had once lived a very different life. Tom was not always like this. He was once a proud soldier, known for his discipline and honesty. He had served his country with loyalty, believing that good always wins when people stand together. But after leaving the army, life changed in ways he never expected. The company he worked for closed down, his savings ran out, and slowly he lost his small apartment. What hurt most was not the loss of money or comfort, but the way people started looking at him, like he was invisible. Even with nothing left, Tom never lost his sense of duty. Every morning he came to the same bench carrying a small notebook and an old pen. He would sit quietly, watching the world around him. Most thought he was wasting time, but he was always observing, thinking, and writing small notes in his book. One cool morning as the city was waking up, Tom noticed something strange near the small convenience store across the park. A police car pulled up, and 2 officers got out. They didn't enter the store like they normally would. Instead, they spoke to the store owner in low voices. Then Tom saw one of them hand over a small envelope before walking away. The store owner looked nervous, glancing around before putting the envelope under the counter. Tom frowned slightly. His training in the army had taught him to notice small details. The quick movements, the secret glances, and the silence that followed. It all felt wrong. At first he thought maybe it was his imagination, but something about that exchange stayed in his mind. The next day, he saw it again. This time, it was 2 different officers, but the same store, the same quiet talk, and the same envelope being passed. Tom's instincts told him that something dishonest was happening. He started writing down everything in his notebook. He recorded the time, the date, and what each officer looked like. He didn't have a phone to take pictures, but his memory was strong. Every detail mattered. Days passed, and Tom continued to observe. He saw the same pattern repeating. Officers visiting the store early in the morning or late at night, always leaving quickly afterward. The store owner avoided eye contact with anyone nearby. Finally, Tom decided to report what he had seen. He knew people might not take him seriously, but he couldn't ignore it. He had taken an oath long ago to stand for what was right, and that oath still meant something to him. He walked to the nearest police station one morning. The building looked big and cold, with shining floors and the smell of strong coffee in the air. When Tom entered, a few officers looked up. Some whispered to each other, while others smiled quietly, clearly amused by his appearance. Tom walked to the front desk and said calmly, "I want to report something suspicious I've been seeing." A young officer at the desk raised an eyebrow. "You want to report something?" he asked, half smiling. "Yes," Tom said firmly. "It's about some officers meeting the store owner at the park. I think something wrong is going on." Another officer nearby chuckled. "Maybe you should worry about finding a meal first, old man," he said jokingly. Tom didn't get angry. He simply opened his notebook and placed it on the desk. "Everything I've seen is written here," he said in a calm voice. "You can check it or you can ignore it. That's your choice." The laughter continued for a moment until an older man stepped forward. He was Captain Reed, one of the senior officers. He took the notebook and began to read it, expecting nonsense. But as his eyes moved over the pages, his face slowly changed. The laughter in the room faded. Tom stood quietly, waiting. Captain Reed looked up, his voice low but serious. "Where did you see all this?" Tom met his eyes and said softly, "Right here in your city, right under your watch." For a long moment, the room was silent. The officers exchanged uneasy looks. Captain Reed closed the notebook slowly, his face thoughtful. Tom turned to leave, but before he stepped outside, he said one last thing. Sometimes the truth doesn't need power. It just needs someone willing to see it. As he walked back toward his bench, the sun began to rise. painting the city in a golden light. Tom sat down again, watching the streets, quietly waiting for what would come next. After Tom left the police station, the air inside the building grew tense. The laughter that had filled the room earlier was now gone. Captain Reed still held the small notebook in his hands, reading the pages again and again. The words were written neatly, every sentence clear and detailed. There were dates, times, and descriptions that matched real officers from their own department. The younger officers began whispering to one another. Some looked uneasy, while others still tried to act calm. But deep inside, everyone felt a strange discomfort. It was unusual for a man who looked homeless to walk in and speak with such confidence, especially about something so serious. Captain Reed closed the notebook and looked around the room. "Does anyone know this man?" he asked. No one answered. "He said his name is Tom," one officer finally said. "He comes to the park every morning. I've seen him sitting on the bench near the old fountain." Reed nodded slowly. "Keep an eye on him," he said in a quiet voice. "And don't talk about this outside. I'll look into it myself." The captain went into his office and closed the door. He sat down and opened the notebook again. Every line was written with care. Tom had mentioned specific officers meeting a shop owner at exact times and in the same pattern for days. It didn't look like random guessing. It looked like someone had been investigating quietly and patiently. Captain Reed knew he couldn't ignore it. He picked up the phone and made a call to the Internal Affairs Department, the team responsible for looking into police misconduct. "I need you to check a few names," he said carefully, "and do it quietly." Meanwhile, back at the park, Tom sat on his usual bench watching people walk by. He had no idea that his notebook had already started to stir the air inside the police department. He just did what he always did, observed and noted what he saw. Later that day, a man in plain clothes approached him. He was tall, wore dark glasses, and carried a small badge clipped to his shirt pocket. "You're Tom, right?" the man asked politely. Tom nodded. "Yes, that's me." The man sat down beside him. "I'm from the Internal Affairs Department. My name is Mr. Harris. Captain Reed gave me your notes." Tom looked at him calmly. "So, someone's finally reading them." "Mr." Harris smiled slightly. "Yes, and what you've written here is serious. Can you tell me more about what you saw?" Tom spoke in a steady tone. "It started with two officers near that convenience store. I saw them meeting the owner, passing something quietly, and leaving quickly. Then others did the same. It happened again and again. The store owner always looked nervous." Mr. Harris listened carefully, writing down everything. "Did anyone else notice this?" he asked. "People see what they want to see," Tom said. "Most don't look twice when a police car stops, but I've seen enough in my life to know when something doesn't feel right." Mr. Harris nodded. "You were in the Army, weren't you?" Tom smiled faintly. "Yes, once upon a time." "I respect that," Harris said. "You did the right thing coming forward. We'll handle it from here." Tom shook his head slightly. "No. If what I think is true, then there are people inside your department who already know what's going on. Be careful whom you trust." Those words stayed in Harris's mind long after he left the park. That evening, Captain Reed met with Harris in his office. Harris placed his notes on the desk. "The man's sharp," he said. "He's not making this up. Everything he described lines up with reports we've been getting about missing evidence and money from small stores. He might have found something real." Reed looked troubled. "If that's true, then some of our own officers might be involved." "I'm afraid so," Harris said. "We'll need to start watching quietly. If he's right, this could go deeper than we think." Reed leaned back in his chair. "Keep Tom safe. If the wrong people find out he's watching them, they might try to scare him away." Harris nodded. "I'll make sure he's not bothered." That night, Tom sat under the streetlight, writing in his notebook again. The city lights reflected in his calm eyes. He didn't know the details of what was happening inside the station, but he could feel that something had started moving. He looked up at the night sky and whispered to himself, Sometimes truth walks alone before anyone believes it. The wind moved softly through the park, carrying the sound of distant traffic. Tom closed his notebook and leaned back on the bench, ready to face whatever would come next. The next morning, the city woke up to another ordinary day, but something was changing quietly beneath the surface. Inside the police station, Captain Reed and Mr. Harris began their silent investigation. They didn't want anyone to know what they were doing. Only a few trusted officers were aware, and even they were told very little. Reed had always believed that his department stood for honesty and service. But now, as he went through the records and patrol reports, strange details began to appear. There were shifts that didn't match, reports filed late, and unexplained gaps in duty logs. It was small things at first, but they started forming a pattern. The same officers Tom had mentioned in his notebook seemed to appear again and again. Meanwhile, Tom continued his quiet routine in the park. To most people, he looked like a lonely man living a hard life. Children played nearby, joggers passed him without a glance, and street vendors set up their stalls each morning. But Tom's eyes never stopped watching. He noticed who came, who left, and who pretended not to see. One afternoon, a young woman named Lena who sold coffee near the park walked up to him. She had often seen him sitting there with his notebook. "You always write something," she said kindly. "Are you a writer?" Tom smiled softly. "Not exactly. Just someone trying to make sense of what's happening around me." Lena gave him a warm cup of coffee. "You look like you've seen a lot," she said. "I have," Tom replied. "And I've learned that silence can sometimes hide the biggest secrets." Lena looked curious. "Secrets? What kind?" Tom didn't answer directly. "Let's just say not everything that shines is gold," he said gently. Lena nodded, not fully understanding but feeling that Tom spoke from experience. At the police station, Mr. Harris found something important. He had checked security footage from the streets near the convenience store. The recordings clearly showed patrol cars stopping at odd hours. The officers who came out were the same ones Tom had written about. It was enough to confirm that Tom's words were not just guesses. Harris went to see Captain Reed with the evidence. "He was right," Harris said, placing a folder on the desk. "Here's the proof. The same cars, the same times, the same people." Reed opened the folder and studied the photos carefully. He felt disappointed but also grateful that the truth was finally coming out. "We'll have to move carefully," he said. "If they find out we know, they might destroy evidence or cover their tracks." "I agree," Harris said. "We'll need to build a case slowly, collect every bit of proof." Reed sighed. "And Tom, we owe him more than we think. Without him, none of this would have started." The two men decided to meet Tom quietly that evening. As the sun began to set, Tom sat on his usual bench writing in his notebook when he saw Reed and Harris walking toward him. They sat down beside him. Reed spoke first. "Tom, we've been checking what you wrote." "You were right." Tom looked at them calmly. "I didn't need to be right. I just wanted someone to see what was in front of them." Harris smiled slightly. "Well, we've seen it now, and we're going to handle it properly, but we might need your help again." Tom tilted his head. "What kind of help?" "We want you to keep watching," Reed said. "Just keep doing what you've been doing. You seem to notice things others don't. If you see anyone acting strange, write it down. Don't talk to anyone about it." Tom nodded. "I can do that. But be careful. If they realize you're looking into them, they'll start watching you too." Reed smiled faintly. "I'll take that warning seriously." As the two officers left, Tom looked at the sky turning orange with the setting sun. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose. For years, people had seen him as a man who had lost everything, but now he was part of something meaningful again. That night, as the city lights shimmered in the distance, Tom continued to write. His notebook was almost full now, filled with details, thoughts, and quiet truths that most people ignored. He didn't know how far this would go, but he knew one thing. Truth had a way of finding light, no matter how long it stayed in the shadows. And somewhere deep inside the station, behind locked doors and tired eyes, Captain Reed began to realize that the city's biggest secret might not just involve a few officers. It might reach higher than anyone imagined. The next few days passed quietly, but under that silence a storm was slowly building. Captain Reed and Mr. Harris continued their investigation in secret. Every night they checked reports, watched camera footage, and compared notes. The more they searched, the more they discovered that the corruption wasn't just limited to a few officers. It went much deeper. One evening, Captain Reed sat alone in his office staring at the files spread across his desk. There were patterns that didn't make sense. Police cars visiting certain shops, missing evidence reports, and accounts showing extra money that no one could explain. He rubbed his forehead tiredly. He had worked in the department for years, believing in honesty and service, and now he felt that trust slowly slipping away. Mr. Harris entered the room quietly. "You're still here," he said softly. Reed nodded. "I can't stop thinking about this. If what we're seeing is true, then someone inside the higher ranks must be protecting them. These officers wouldn't take such risks unless they felt safe." Harris placed a file on the desk. "You're right. I checked financial records. One of the senior inspectors has been receiving strange payments through fake accounts. The money comes from small shop owners, and the same ones Tom mentioned." Reed looked up. "So it goes higher than we thought." Harris nodded slowly. "Yes, and that means we'll have to be even more careful." Meanwhile, in the park, Tom continued his quiet watch. The days had started getting colder, and the wind carried the smell of dry leaves. Tom didn't mind the weather. He wrapped himself in his old army jacket and sat on his bench with his notebook open. Lena, the coffee vendor, noticed him again that morning. "You're still at it," she said with a smile, handing him a warm cup. "You must be writing something very important." Tom smiled kindly. "Let's just say I'm helping the truth find its way." Lena looked curious. "You sound like someone who used to be in charge of something big." "I used to be part of something honest," Tom said. "And I still try to be." Lena didn't understand everything, but she admired his calmness. Most people ignored him, but she saw something different in him, something strong and peaceful. Later that day, Tom noticed a new police car driving slowly past the park. Two officers looked at him as they passed, their eyes lingering a little too long. Tom noticed their faces carefully and wrote down their names on his page. Something about their watchful look told him they knew who he was. That night, Mr. Harris called Captain Reed. "I think the leak is out," he said quietly. "Someone must have told them that we're looking into things. I saw two officers near the park today. They weren't there to patrol." "They were watching Tom," Reed frowned. "That's not good. He's not safe if they know he's the one who reported it." "I agree," Harris said. "We can't move him officially without raising questions, but we can keep someone nearby to make sure nothing happens." "I'll handle it," Reed said firmly. The next morning, Reed himself went to the park. Tom was sitting in his usual place, feeding a few pigeons. When he saw Reed, he gave a polite nod. "You shouldn't come here so openly," Tom said quietly. Reed smiled slightly. "You're probably right, but I wanted to thank you. Without your notes, we might never have found out how deep this goes." Tom looked thoughtful. "It's not over yet. You're facing something bigger than a few wrong people. You're facing a system that forgot what truth means." Reed nodded slowly. "Maybe, but we'll bring it back, even if it takes time." Tom looked at him calmly. "Then make sure you don't give up halfway." Reed gave a small smile. "I won't." As Reed left the park, Tom watched him go, feeling both proud and worried. He knew what it meant to stand against something powerful. He had done it before in uniform on different soil. Now he was doing it again, not with weapons, but with truth and patience. That evening, as the city lights came on, Tom noticed a familiar shadow near the street corner. Someone was standing there watching him again. He didn't react. He just turned another page in his notebook and kept writing as if nothing had changed. The wind grew colder, but Tom didn't leave. He knew that the truth he had uncovered was no longer just his burden. Others were finally seeing it too. And somewhere inside the police station, Captain Reed made a silent promise to himself, to bring light to every corner of the darkness, no matter how deep it went. Days passed slowly, but the quiet tension around the police station kept growing. Captain Reed and Mr. Harris continued their investigation carefully, avoiding any sudden moves that might alert those involved. Every new piece of evidence they found connected more people to the corruption: officers, a few store owners, and even one high-ranking inspector. Inside the station, things looked normal on the surface. Officers came and went, paperwork moved across desks, and phones kept ringing. But behind the polite greetings and friendly smiles, there were whispers. People wondering why Captain Reed seemed distant lately, and why Mr. Harris was visiting so often. One afternoon, Captain Reed sat with Harris in his office, speaking in low voices. "We're getting closer," Reed said, opening a folder filled with notes. "These bank records show payments coming from several small shops. The money is moved to fake accounts and then disappears. The same shops that the officers were visiting." Harris nodded. "And the pattern matches what Tom wrote in his notebook." He saw what no one else wanted to see. He was the first to notice something wrong. Reed smiled faintly. "Strange, isn't it? A man with nothing left managed to see the truth better than people surrounded by it." At that same moment, Tom was sitting in his usual place at the park. The sky was gray and the wind carried the scent of rain. He pulled his jacket tighter and continued writing in his notebook. He had filled almost every page now, pages full of times, names, and small but important details. Lena, the coffee vendor, approached him again. She had brought him a sandwich and a cup of coffee. "You always look busy," she said kindly. "I thought you might need this." Tom looked up and smiled. "Thank you, Lena, you're always thoughtful." She sat beside him. "People say you used to be in the army. Is that true?" Tom nodded slowly. "Yes, a long time ago." She looked at him curiously. "Do you miss it?" "Sometimes," he said. "Not because of the uniform or the rank, but because of the honesty. Everyone knew what they stood for. Here, it's harder to find that." Lena was silent for a moment. "You sound like someone who still believes in good things." Tom smiled faintly. "Belief is what keeps us human, even when life takes everything else." As they spoke, a car parked quietly across the street. Two men sat inside, pretending to read newspapers. Tom noticed them from the corner of his eye. They had been around before, always near the park, always pretending not to look at him. He didn't react. Instead, he continued writing, pretending not to notice. Later that evening, Mr. Harris came to the park to meet him. He looked serious but calm. "Tom," he said softly, sitting beside him, "things are getting complicated. We found out that some people inside the department are trying to move the evidence. They might know we're watching." Tom nodded slowly. "I thought so. I've seen two men sitting across the park for 3 days now. They pretend to read, but they're watching me." Harris looked surprised. "You noticed them?" Tom smiled a little. "Old habits die hard. You learn to see what others miss." Harris leaned closer. "You need to be careful. They might not know exactly how much you found, but they know you're involved." Tom looked at the fading sunlight. "I'm not worried. I've lived through worse. Just promise me something. Don't stop looking, no matter how difficult it gets." Harris nodded firmly. "I promise." That night, Captain Reed sat in his office looking out the window at the city lights. He thought about Tom, a man who had no home, no position, and no resources, yet had shown more courage than most. It made Reed think about his own duty. For years he had served by the book, but now he realized that true service wasn't about following orders. It was about doing what was right, even when no one else dared to. Meanwhile, Tom sat under the dim streetlight, writing one last entry in his notebook for the day. His handwriting was slow but steady. He wrote about hope. Hope that one honest act could still make a difference. He looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the night sky and whispered quietly, "The truth may walk slowly, but it never stops." As the night deepened, the two men in the car finally drove away, leaving the park silent again. Tom closed his notebook and smiled faintly. He knew they were watching him, but he also knew something else. The truth was already in motion and no one could stop it now. A soft rain fell over the city, washing the streets clean. The lights reflected off the wet ground, creating golden ripples that moved with the passing cars. Inside the police station, Captain Reed sat at his desk, deep in thought. The papers before him told a story that few wanted to read, a story about trust, greed, and silence. Mr. Harris entered quietly, carrying a folder filled with new evidence. His coat was damp from the rain. "We found more records," he said. "Payments from 3 more shops. It's the same pattern. Small amounts sent regularly to the same hidden accounts." Reed sighed softly. "That means there's a network," he said. "It's not just a few officers. Someone higher is keeping it alive." Harris nodded. "We can't expose it yet. If we act too fast, they'll hide everything. We need one clear connection, one piece that links it all together." Reed looked at him seriously. "And we might already have that connection," he said. "Tom." Meanwhile, Tom was sitting in the park as usual, his jacket soaked but his notebook still in his hands. He didn't mind the rain. It reminded him of his army days, quiet, steady, and cleansing. He sat under the small roof of a bus stop, writing down new observations. Lena, the coffee vendor, hurried toward him, holding a small umbrella. "Tom, you'll get sick sitting here in the rain," she said gently. Tom smiled faintly. "I've faced worse weather before." "Don't worry," she looked at him kindly. "You're always writing something important, aren't you?" Tom nodded slowly. "I'm trying to finish a story that started long before anyone noticed it." Lena tilted her head, confused but curious. "What kind of story?" Tom smiled again. "A story about truth, the kind that hides in plain sight." That evening, as darkness settled over the city, Mr. Harris came to meet Tom once more. He carried a small folder wrapped in a plastic cover to protect it from the rain. "Tom," he said softly, sitting beside him, "we've confirmed most of your notes. The things you saw are real. The money trail leads directly to one of the senior inspectors, Inspector Cole." Tom's eyes narrowed slightly. "And does Captain Reed know?" "Yes," Harris replied. "He's gathering all the files. But there's one thing missing. We need proof that Cole himself is collecting the money." Tom was silent for a moment. "He's careful, isn't he?" "Very careful," Harris said. "He uses others to do his work. That's why it's been so hard to catch him." Tom leaned back, thinking, "Then maybe you need someone who can get close without being noticed." Harris looked puzzled. "Who do you mean?" Tom gave a small smile. "People don't notice me. They walk past me every day and I'm invisible to them. Maybe it's time to use that." Harris looked uncertain. "That could be risky." Tom shook his head calmly. "I've been through enough to know when something is worth the risk. I can help you see what's hidden." The next day, Tom followed his quiet routine again, but this time he was watching with a purpose. He noticed the same officers visiting the small stores, collecting envelopes and driving away. His sharp eyes followed every move. He noted every time, every license plate, every face. From a distance, a plain car waited with Harris inside, taking quiet notes of his own. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The old soldier and the investigator worked in silent understanding. By evening, Tom had gathered enough new details to fill several pages. When he met Harris again, he handed over the notes. "He's using a delivery man to collect the envelopes," Tom said. "The man goes to 4 stores in a row, always the same order. The last stop is near the police station." Harris looked amazed. "That's it," he said quietly. "That's what we needed." Tom smiled faintly. Then maybe the story is almost ready to end. That night, Captain Reed looked through the latest notes and photos. He felt both proud and sad. Proud because the truth was finally coming together, and sad because it had taken a man with nothing, a man the world ignored, to show them what was right in front of them. As Reed closed the folder, he looked out of the window at the city lights. The rain had stopped and a thin fog covered the streets. He whispered to himself, "Sometimes the strongest voice comes from the quietest corner." Far away, Tom sat under the same dim streetlight in the park, his notebook closed beside him. He felt a calm sense of peace. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew the truth was no longer hidden. It was on its way to being free. The next few days were filled with quiet movements and careful plans. Captain Reed, Mr. Harris, and Tom worked together like pieces of a puzzle. Each one had a role that only they could play. The truth was close, but it needed one final step to be complete. One morning, Reed called a small meeting in his office. The blinds were half closed, and a soft beam of light fell across the table. On it lay several photos, receipts, and small notes written in Tom's careful handwriting. Reed looked at Harris and said, "Tomorrow night the money will be collected again. If we're ready, we can finally catch the full chain in action." Harris nodded. "We already have the pattern. The delivery man will start at the grocery shop on Hill Street, then visit the bakery, the repair shop, and finally the old store near the station." Tom, sitting quietly in a chair near the window, looked thoughtful. "I can be there," he said. "They won't notice me, like always." Reed looked at him seriously. "Tom, you've already done enough. We can handle it from here." Tom smiled faintly. "Captain, sometimes people listen only when they see things with their own eyes. Let me make sure no detail is missed." Reed studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but stay safe and stay out of their way. Just watch and note everything." That evening, as the city lights began to glow, Tom walked his usual path through the park and into the streets. He carried his small notebook and an old camera that Harris had given him. The camera was old but still worked well enough to capture what mattered. He reached the bakery just before closing time. The air smelled of fresh bread and rain. He sat across the street near a small bench, pretending to fix his worn shoe while keeping an eye on the road. Soon, a small white van stopped near the bakery. A man stepped out wearing a dark cap. He walked inside, stayed a few minutes, and came out holding a small envelope. Tom quietly took a picture, his hands steady. The man moved on, stopping at each place just like before. Tom followed slowly, always keeping a distance, always unnoticed. His old army training helped him move quietly and stay calm. At the last stop near the old store close to the police station, something caught Tom's eye. The delivery man didn't go inside. Instead, he handed the envelope to another person, a tall man in plain clothes who came from the direction of the station. Tom recognized the face immediately. It was Inspector Cole. For a moment, Tom's heart beat faster. He raised the camera and clicked twice, catching the exchange clearly. The tall man slipped the envelope into his coat pocket and walked away as if nothing had happened. Tom quietly noted the time and place, then left before anyone could notice him. He went straight to the quiet corner of the park where Harris had promised to meet him. When Harris arrived, Tom handed him the notebook and camera. "It's done," Tom said calmly. "You'll find what you need inside." Harris opened the camera and checked the photos. His face changed from surprise to relief. "You did it, Tom. This is enough proof to start a full investigation. Cole can't hide this anymore." Tom gave a small smile. "I didn't do it alone. You believed me when no one else did. That's what made this possible." Harris nodded gratefully. "You'll always have my respect, Tom. You gave us the truth when everyone else ignored it." That night, Captain Reed reviewed the new photos. He could hardly believe how much one man had done. A man who lived on the street had uncovered what many trained officers could not. He called Harris and said quietly, "Tomorrow we'll bring this to the department head." No more silence. Meanwhile, Tom sat under the same dim streetlight in the park. He looked up at the clear sky where the rain had finally stopped. The stars peeked out between thin clouds, shining softly. He felt a calm peace inside him. For the first time in a long while, Tom felt that his life had meaning again. He had not just survived. He had helped others see the truth. He had shown that even those forgotten by the world could bring light where there was darkness. Before closing his eyes, he whispered to himself, "Sometimes, the smallest step in the right direction can change everything." The night was quiet and the city seemed to breathe easier. The next morning would bring new challenges, but also justice. Something long delayed, but now finally on its way. The morning sun reflected softly on the city streets. The rain from the previous night had washed everything clean, giving the city a fresh start. Inside the police station, Captain Reed and Mr. Harris prepared to take the evidence to the department head. Today, the truth would finally be seen by those who could act on it. Reed held the folder of photographs and notes carefully. "Harris," he said quietly, "it's hard to believe how much one man has done." Tom didn't just see the problem, and he traced it all the way to the source. Harris nodded. "It's amazing, Captain. He didn't need power, rank, or money. Just patience, observation, and courage." They made their way to the department head's office. The senior officials were already waiting. Reed presented the evidence calmly, speaking with clarity and respect. Each photo, each note, and every detail from Tom's notebook was explained step by step. The department head, a stern but fair man named Commissioner Wallace, listened quietly. His face was serious as he went through the photographs. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "This is more than I expected. The evidence is clear, and the actions of Inspector Cole cannot be ignored. We will start an official review immediately." Reed nodded. "We also need to recognize the person who discovered this. He may not hold a title, but he has shown more integrity than many of us." Commissioner Wallace looked thoughtful. "Yes, he deserves recognition. Find him." Meanwhile, Tom sat quietly on his park bench, writing the final notes in his notebook. He didn't know that today would bring a change not just for the department, but also for him personally. Lena, the coffee vendor, approached him with her usual warmth. "Tom, you look peaceful today," she said. "Something feels different," Tom smiled faintly. "Perhaps it is. Sometimes patience and quiet observation lead to results. Today might be one of those days." A few hours later, Reed and Harris arrived at the park. Tom noticed them immediately but didn't move. Reed approached him carefully. "Tom," Reed said, his voice calm but full of respect. "The department has seen everything. They know what you discovered. Commissioner Wallace wants to meet you. He wants to thank you personally." Tom blinked in surprise. "Me? But I'm just a man sitting in the park," Reed smiled. "You're more than that. You've reminded us all that truth doesn't depend on status. You've done what no one else could do quietly and carefully." Harris nodded. "Your notebook, your observations, and they've changed things. The department will correct the mistakes and Inspector Cole will face accountability. None of this would have been possible without you." Tom felt a quiet sense of pride. For the first time in many years, he didn't feel invisible. He had made a difference not with money, power, or weapons, but with honesty, courage, and patience. Later, in the commissioner's office, Tom sat across from Wallace, Reed, and Harris. The commissioner shook his hand firmly. "Tom, your actions have reminded all of us what integrity truly means. The city owes you a debt of gratitude. I want to present you with this award, not just for uncovering the truth, but for showing us that courage can come from anywhere." Tom accepted the award humbly. "Thank you, sir. I only did what I thought was right. Anyone else in my place might have done the same." Wallace smiled. "Not everyone sees what is right in the world, Tom. You did." After leaving the office, Tom walked back to his park bench. The pigeons cooed softly around him and the sun shone warmly. Lena was waiting, a small cup of coffee in her hand. "You did it, Tom," she said with a smile. "You changed things," Tom smiled back. "We all have a choice," he said. "Even when the world ignores us, we can still do what is right. That's all that matters." The city moved around him, alive and busy as ever, but Tom felt calm and content. For years he had been invisible, overlooked, and forgotten. Now he had shown that one person, even without power, could bring light to shadows. As he opened his notebook one last time, he wrote quietly, "Truth finds a way. Patience reveals the path. Courage shines quietly, even in the darkest places." He closed the notebook, looking at the city skyline. The future was wide open, full of possibilities. And for the first time, Tom felt that he truly belonged, not because of what he had lost, but because of what he had done. The sun climbed higher, warming the streets, and somewhere in the heart of the city a quiet hero smiled, knowing the world had finally seen him, and the truth he had uncovered.